Hey everyone, how you guys doing tonight or this morning or tomorrow, wherever and whenever it happens to be where you are? Welcome to Neurofeedback and Chill. I am your host, Dr. Andrew Hill, and we are here to talk about neurofeedback and some other aspect of the brain. Tonight we're talking about alpha waves a little more. We talked once before about alpha in depth, and I've gotten a lot of questions about alpha waves. So I thought I would dig back in and talk specifically about how alpha works a little bit more, some of the ways that alpha waves get deregulated and how we can feel that they're thrown off a little bit, and what that looks like, and what we can do. And I'll also train some of my own alpha tonight indirectly, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. So let me get the title going here. So let's see, I already got some questions. I see Leandro. Hey, hello, sir. How are you tonight? Do you recommend doing neurofeedback alongside supplements that modulate GABA or glutamate? If so, which ones? Good question. Topical, because of course GABA is related heavily to alpha. And the short answer is maybe. I don't recommend modulating glutamate. I think the brain is really bad at recovering from glutamate modulation, and generally you don't want to muck with it. And alpha waves and GABA as a support for alpha, yes, I think that not every person will benefit from this or need this, but I think many people would find that combining maybe L-theanine and GABA supplements themselves can really help support the sort of GABAergic tone, the ability to downshift deeply into relax mode. There's literature showing that GABA and L-theanine used in combination have 6 times the impact on circadian sort of sleep onset timing than either one does alone. So yeah, I think it can be interesting. I think that the GABA glutamate balance is pretty tight, and so you shouldn't do a lot to modulate those two neurotransmitters. This is why with alcohol, if we continue to drink alcohol releases huge amounts of GABA. We get huge amounts of alpha tone from the alcohol we're consuming chronically, and the chronically elevated levels of GABA require the brain to elevate levels of glutamate. And then if you sort of dry out and stop drinking chronically, the tonic, if you will, GABA levels drop away as they're not well supported by the lack of drinking. The glutamate isn't able to recover the same way, and it stays elevated. And this is one of the primary phenomena that drives the seizure proneness of people when they're detoxing from alcohol or even longer term. So glutamate tends to be irritating the brain, and GABA, or at least promoting firing, and GABA is promoting not firing. Many other neurotransmitters do different things based on which neuron they're in. But GABA, when you're an adult, is universally inhibitory, and glutamate is universally excitatory. When you're very, very young, they share some of each other's role, and they actually look like each other chemically as well a bit. So there's some overlap there. But the balance of GABA glutamate is heavily managed in the body, just the same way that things like blood pH are heavily managed, where you can't really deviate from a really narrow range or bad things happen. In the case of GABA glutamate, you pass out or you have seizures, essentially. So Leo's asking, how come not to mess with glutamate? I think that answered your question. It'll create this seizure phenomena potentially. Hey, Radar Ashwood, nice to see you tonight. How you doing? So we're talking about alpha. What else should we talk about? Alpha, of course, is the neutral. If you're new to alpha, I did do a longer video on alpha itself a few months ago, but in general, alpha is the neutral tone in the brain. It's the idling mechanism. It's the 10 hertz wave in adults. In children, it's slower because children's brains run at a slower clip until the cell density and the myelination builds up enough to speed it up. So alpha matures into an adult speed, and it's between the other brain waves in terms of the middle of the range. Above alpha, you have the betas and the gammas, which are more involved with conscious thought and information processing. And below alpha, you have thetas and deltas, or the slow brain waves, which are more involved with automatic process and the stuff of life when you get down to delta. So alpha ends up being the idling, and we can think about alpha as the speed of processing, the speed of thought, the speed of information processing. We can also think of it as the ability to drop into the alpha, into the neutral tone, like you're able to put the machine or the circuit into neutral voluntarily. So too little alpha in a big circuit, like the singulates, for instance, means they can't shut off. They have no chill. And if your singulates have no alpha, the one in the front, you'll get obsessive. The one in the back, you'll be threat sensitive. If you have no alpha behind your right ear, you may have a sensory or sort of social loading phenomena going on when you can't ignore the information coming in. So alpha is useful to make when you want to, but you also want to be able to shut it off. There's a big circuit on the left-hand side of the brain, the precentral gyrus, that stabilizes the executive function. And if you open your eyes and the alpha stays high everywhere, especially there, we tend to see inattentiveness and difficulty sustaining attention under low intensity. So you want to be able to have control over your alpha more than having a lot of it or a little of it. But generally one wants healthy alpha that modulates as needed, and quick alpha, a frequency that runs pretty fast, but not super fast. You don't want to be standing on the gas the whole time, but you wouldn't mind most of us being a little bit smoother and sharper than average, which is what fast alpha tends to do. Some more questions here. Hey, Radar, low alpha increases GABA. I would say that GABA increases low alpha. I would say GABA is an alpha phenomena largely. And high alpha increases norepinephrine. Yeah, but when you say fast alpha, I think you're really talking about a preparatory alpha as it speeds up into beta largely. Often alpha is considered a 10 hertz. Sorry if there's sirens you guys can hear. Alpha is considered a 10 hertz wave, but there's really a couple of waves that Radar is pointing out. The slow alpha, or alpha 1, which is usually in adults 8 to 10 hertz. And there's fast alpha, which is 10 to 12. And you can think of 10 as the transition between the idling rhythm and the preparatory rhythm as it speeds up. But that 8 to 10 hertz alpha is the dominant alpha rhythm, and the 10 to 12 is not there tonically as a resting central rhythm. It's really one that happens occasionally, and if it's in too high tone, if it's happening too often, it causes trouble, and it acts like a beta wave cluster. So if you have high amounts of 10 to 12 hertz stuck alpha, you'll often see this, for instance, on the singulates, on both of them. And you'll typically see some hypercoherence between the singulates in the alpha range when somebody is hypercoherent and has a large amount of amplitude or power at FZ and PZ on a QEEG, the front midline, the back midline, or anterior and posterior cingulate. If you have this alpha, generally you'll be a little obsessive, but it won't be classic OCD stuff. It'll be sort of inattentive obsessiveness, like this. You'll tend to see a really strong resistance to doing things, or an inertia that's quite powerful, or a mood that's quite stuck. It's an odd kind of stuckness, but with an anxiety component to it generally, not a sort of idling, relaxed component to it. So we don't want to be making 10 to 12 hertz fast alpha tonically, only phasically as needed. And tonic alpha, background resting stuff, I think is more 8 to 10 hertz. So that's my take on slow versus fast alpha, Radar. All right, so let me set myself up for a session. I'm actually going to do an FZ minus PZ. I'm going to do a down training. Last week I did a down training, really enjoyed the after effects. So I mentioned, I think in the session, that I was feeling kind of clear. And gosh, didn't that last? I felt really, really good, really clear, really calm, productive. It felt a little bit like the best aspects of a stimulant, like Adderall or something, without any stimulant effect at all. And I just trained down essentially the theta. I'll show you what I did. I'll do it again this week. But the reason that I'm training these tissues and calling it alpha training, even though I'm not manipulating alpha tonight, is because I'm training things that get in the way of alpha. So if you inhibit thetas, you inhibit faster betas and leave a gap in the alpha range, my brain can decide to bring up 8 to 10, 10 to 12, 9 to 11, whatever. And any dearth of alpha that maybe naturally is there will come up in the absence of the maybe excess theta or excess beta my brain might produce. Leo has a follow-on question for glutamate. Leo's asking if someone's glutamate levels are chronically elevated. Okay. How do you adjust neurofeedback protocols to prevent overstimulation or training resistance, especially in alpha, theta, or SMR sessions? I mean, the answer is sort of right there, Leo. You can use SMR initially to re-regulate sleep. So you'll have a pretty shaky, seizure-prone person if the glutamate levels are super elevated. A lot of beta hypercoherence, very low delta tone, very low delta power. And if you work on SMR initially, C4, CZ, SMR, you'll end up getting really strong, generally sleep changes, as well as a reduction in impulsivity, which for some people with alcohol especially, and this is sort of that glutamate, that classic extra glutamate is somebody for whom alcohol has been a chronic phenomena. And so they're making lots of glutamate and it's breaking through that alcohol or the absence of alcohol. So with this person, you would just do SMR training, and you might want to undershoot a tiny bit, not do 12 hertz, be very sensitive to their response. If you're doing SMR at the right frequency, as you tune it, the person gets a physical response, especially at CZ. So you can kind of see their optimal frequency by watching the body softening effect that occurs. And once you find their SMR that's sort of softening, you can do some SMR for a while. Generally, you'll see sleep respond. And after sleep responds, and you have a couple of good SMR protocols to work with, then you would bring in alpha theta, then and only then. You really shouldn't do alpha theta when you have high theta. So you have to have gotten a handle on it a little bit with the SMR training. But then bring in alpha theta and then blend them. Do combo protocols where you do alpha theta first, then SMR protocols following on in the same session. And in terms of which alpha theta, the individual's sort of presentation, their complaint, how their brain looks, should help you know if you need to do parietal versus occipital and single channel versus two channel sort of coherence-based training. I think those are really important decisions to make often off the QEEG. And it can really help accelerate change if you're able to figure out which alpha theta is the most impactful. But you don't have to get super specific. All alpha theta, when done in the same region, is pretty good, actually. If it's indicated, you'll get some of the good effects for the person. So, more questions here. Cool. El Chatterino, hello. What do I look out for when the ratio between low and high alpha with managing the front versus the back, i.e. PZ to FZ? Well, here's the thing. I don't think about the ratios. What I do think about is the natural resting modes of the tissues. So one would not generally expect to see large amounts of alpha at FZ, especially not in resting mode or eyes closed. So if you do have alpha that's persistent in FZ in a phasic way, it's probably pathological. And you're gonna see some cross frequency coupling with other frequencies, often theta or beta, usually theta or beta, and you're probably gonna see coherence issues within the alpha. And so at that point, I would actually be probably targeting the specific alpha that has the issue. And again, I often train around the alpha instead of training the alpha. So let me set up my own session now tonight. Let me get rid of the title here. You guys know what you're watching by now. Where's the show title? There it is. Keep asking questions though, please. Let me set up my session. All right, I'm going to move myself down to the bottom. Just ignore the fact that I'm not looking, just so you guys can see what I'm doing fully. All right, so let's plan the session. All right, so I'm already set up. You can see here on the left-hand side of Eager screen, this is called Eager, the software. We have 4 little boxes that say setup, run, setup, run. Each pair of setup and runs is a protocol segment. A setup is the frequencies and sites in the head, a run is a time. And so right now I'm in the first setup block. You can see that my electrodes on the head are at FZ and PZ. That's also what's typed in right there. And you can see that what I'm doing is setting up to inhibit or train down theta brain waves, 4 to 7. Also inhibit 12 to 20, which is a broad beta, and also inhibit 20 to 32. So often in neurofeedback, we reward a frequency or a band, and we inhibit others. In this case, I'm actually inhibiting 3. It's called down training or squash training. And you can see that in the frequency ranges, the numbers, there's actually a gap between 7 and 12. And by leaving a gap there, a windowed squash, I'm allowing my brain to sort of decide if it needs to or wants to bring up alpha in the 8 to 10 hertz range or 10 to 12 hertz range without really being pushy. And one of the reasons is that alpha training can be a little bit, that doesn't backfire, but it pushes back. Alpha is the idling frequency of the brain. It's the car's engine when in the background. And so it tends to resist big things that push on it because it's a feature of stability in the brain. And so if you push on the alpha in an individual circuit too aggressively or much, what'll often happen is it'll change when you're doing the neurofeedback session, and you'll feel it change for an hour or two. And then it will like rebound in the opposite direction. And you can use this sometimes if you need to, and especially in the case of like Sieber and Fisher style work, you can get the posterior cingulate and other posterior tissues to sort of rebound into a stronger alpha mode, which seems to break free of the hyperconnectivity between areas like the amygdala and the posterior cingulate and the periaqueductal gray, which is involved with the perception and experience of physical and emotional pain. So alpha is used as this background idle. And so the big takeaway, it's kind of complicated, sorry. The big takeaway is that it's really complicated to manipulate. So ease in and test ideas. And if you can, do something like what I'm doing where I do want to manipulate my alpha. Like El Chatterino, or maybe it was Radar, I don't have the chat up right now. One of you guys just asked about preparatory 10 to 12 alpha, essentially. And I know that I make a lot of 10 to 12 hertz alpha, and I don't want to make more. So instead of rewarding 7 to 10, 8 to 11, and maybe catching the edge of alpha that's fast and raising it higher, I'm going to leave a hole in the manipulated bands and allow my brain to do what it wants to with the 7 to 12 hertz range. So that's the first session or first segment. Second segment becomes an SMR, a C4 minus A2. And I liked this protocol last week, so I'm going to crank the time up and do 2 12-minute segments. Well, I'll do 9 and 12. That's fine. We'll crank it up slowly. All right, so let me get myself back talking to you guys. And I'll set up my session. So Leo saying, beautiful explanation. You are, thank you, Leo. I appreciate your kind words. The uniqueness of each individual makes it a trial and error a little bit. Yep. How many sessions before you expect to hit the spot? When it comes to SMR training, Leo, I think you know right away. I think if you're watching somebody train, it's a little actually harder to tell if it's you. But if you're training somebody else and watching them and you shift the SMR up and down a little bit, you'll see somebody when you hit the right frequency within about 30 seconds go, and like kind of soften. And if it's a kid or somebody with developmental issues and you overtrain especially, you'll see somebody start scratching the back of their neck or their hands. You'll see like an extra fidgetiness. So you can tell there's like an over-arousal phenomena creeping in or an activation phenomena creeping in. That's a sign you're running too fast. So you can do that. You can also use, in terms of picking SMR frequencies, it's important to know that SMR doesn't mature into being the same way that alpha does. Alpha, if you're like a 7-year-old, your peak alpha frequency, your mean alpha when the eyes are closed, back of the head, might be something like 8 hertz, 8 cycles per second. But if you're an adult, it's like 10. And maybe it's 7 when you're a kid. And it's going to speed up into that 10 hertz range. And you can look at someone's peak alpha frequency with their eyes closed and get a sense of how fast their brain is running. But the SMR frequencies, the low beta frequencies, SMR, sensory motor rhythm, is a beta wave cluster made on the sensory motor strip that helps with inhibitory tone. It helps pump the brakes. It helps stay asleep. It helps suppress seizures, sit still. It's what you see when you watch a cat on the windowsill looking at birds. That completely still body and laser-like focus is SMR, sensory motor rhythm. And most animals make it, and we use it for a bunch of deep regulatory things. So you can think of SMR as the alpha of the beta waves. It's a quiescent or an modulating tone, balancing tone within the beta, as opposed to an activating tone. So you should know right away, Leo. What I would say is you can also see sleep changes. SMR is known as sleep spindles. So if you train someone's SMR at the appropriate frequency for them, they tend to have an easier time falling asleep and sleep very deeply. If you train the SMR up too fast or too slow, you'll create both sleep onset and sleep maintenance difficulties. And so you can watch for those, and based on what happens, you can know if you overshot or undershot the frequency a little bit. But the point of maturational changes is, if you work with a 7-year-old or a 5-year-old, you're not going to be sort of cheating down in frequency the same way you might with the alpha wave training. So you can really, it's a little slower, but I really don't go below about 11 hertz for the SMR, even in somebody very, very young, like a 5-year-old. So, you can take that into account, but look at the QEEG as well. El Chatarino's asking, so better to hit that with an SMR beta 1 and shore up alpha with stabilization. Yeah, probably. So that's why I'm doing the SMR after doing the inhibits. You may have noticed my FZ minus PZ downtraining had a 12 to 20 broad wide inhibit. And that means that I might be training down SMR across the middle of the head because we're catching some of the CZ potentially. But not a huge amount, but we could. And so I'm doing a C4 SMR to make sure I'm reinforcing the SMR tone, which will have some of the same impact as good, robust alpha tone. So you can, do that C4 minus A2 SMR and get another secondary effect on the alpha itself. So I'm doing 2 protocols, neither of which is alpha manipulating, both of which are meant to encourage my alpha to be healthy and well regulated. Hope that made sense. J. Joe Barr, how you doing, sir? For SMR, would you reward the same frequency at CZ as it would at C4? Not exactly. And does it depend on where reference is? It does, yes. There are some rules of thumb. These are not hard and fast. And you can, again, really look at how someone sleeps or how their body feels to get a sense of if you're nailing it in terms of frequency. But in general, if we compared something like C4 minus A1 and CZ minus A1, you will find that CZ runs slightly slower than C4, maybe half a hertz or a quarter hertz slower than the C4. In general, though, the left hemisphere runs faster than the right hemisphere for the same locations, like C3 versus C4. And keep that in mind when you're thinking about the C4 reference, because I don't reference CZ to the right side unless, someone's QEEG really demanded it. Normally I would do CZ minus A1 and C4 minus whichever made more sense. And in this case, C4 minus A1 versus C4 minus A2 in the same person, you would probably run a little slower in the C4 minus A2 because the right hemisphere in general is running a little bit slower and is more sensitive to overtraining. Also, when the wires are closer together, much more focused signal, less of the signal, more is subtracted out through common mode rejection, but it's a much more focused right hemisphere signal, obviously. So right hemisphere doesn't tolerate being uptrained quite so aggressively. So it does matter a little bit. And for the same individual, I'll cheat down a little bit going C4A2, I'll push it a little bit C4A1, and then I'll back off again at CZ minus A1. And then crank it up a couple more hertz at C3 minus A1. Now it's 15 hertz or 14 and a half. So I hope that made sense. Leo's saying, is this live being recorded? Yes, it is. These Monday Night Lives are every week they're recorded. So you can go back and review this one at your leisure, my friend. Please feel free to leave questions later on too. I do come back and answer them. And if you're watching this now, hey guys, I see there's a bunch of folks that are on. Do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. In general, only about half of my watchers are subscribed. So if you aren't yet subscribed, give me a subscribe. Maybe hit the notification bell so that YouTube tells you when I'm live. Radar is saying, how often would I adjust a manual threshold while training? I don't find that I need to manually threshold Radar generally. I don't use manual thresholding. I use periodic thresholding. And with children and adults, I find 30 seconds works pretty well for most goals. Radar is asking, why would inhibiting theta at PZ seem to increase stress response? Well, I mean, what else is going on there at PZ? You're probably not just inhibiting PZ by inhibiting theta. You're probably releasing something else. Is my hunch. Not sure. You also might be, inhibiting alpha, because 4 to 7 theta Remember, we don't really measure discrete frequencies with boxes that cut off. We measure with filters that roll off. And it's standard to use a third order filter in signal processing for EEG as a nice trade-off between the speed of the processing and the accuracy of the processing. So if you got perfectly accurate band measurements, they would take several seconds, which is useless in a feedback environment. So most of the software packages use something that approaches a third order filter, even if they're not doing classic filters like Butterworth. The time frequency trade-off is still around the same sweet spot of a third order, which means that you tend to get other frequencies captured. So you end up with a little bit of like 7.5 and a little bit of 8. And so it could be that you're actually inhibiting your alpha radar, and you're creating a little bit of release of fast beta or fast alpha at PZ by inhibiting slower alpha. Maybe the alpha is 6 to 9, and you're catching the bottom edge of it and shutting it off a little bit, which creates a faster alpha 2 surge at that point. That's my guess. Yeah, maybe allowing processing to kick in, El Chad. Yeah, like overly kick in. Yeah, exactly. All right, I get myself up here. We're having a great conversation, but you guys want to see some neurofeedback, I hope. So let me take my headset off. Please let me know if the audio drops out because I'm not listening. Got some paste. Got an amp. Got to put some wires on my head. Let's put my head back up in there. There we go. All right, so FC minus PZ and C4 minus A2. So we only really need one ear clip tonight. So I'll take one ear clip off the wire bundle here, and I'll plug it into the ground right now, which is the green socket. There we go. And since the first segment is FC minus PZ, I can use any location on the head for ground. Doesn't matter where the ground is. But I'm going to use my right ear because the second protocol uses the A2, the right ear, as the reference, as the subtraction point. And so this way I can just leave the wire in the same ear and move it as it's plugged into the amp. It just saves me an extra wire setup. Radar Ashwood is saying, periodic thresholding, do I mean auto thresholding? Yeah, but not continuous, Radar. So like every 30 seconds, I'll recalculate. You'll see it happen in eager in real time. But every 30 seconds, I recalculate the percentages as, in this case, with 3 bands, 25, 65, 15 is my classic percentages I use, meaning 25% inhibit on the slow inhibit, 65% reward, or 35% inhibit on the down training like tonight, and then 15% inhibit on the faster frequency wide upper range. All right, a couple more wires. Got to get an FC and a PZ. So there's one. And there's a second one. Where's the second one? So rule of thumb, or rather word to the wise, don't use the same color wires on your head if you want to know which wire is plugged into the amp. Always separate the colors so you can glance down and see what's plugged in without having to like trace the wires aggressively. El Chatarino saying, let's see some Island. You want to see Island? Okay. Classic old school. Yeah, so let me know if you guys want to see other games in Eager. I keep threatening to install all the third-party games and then show them to you, but no one's gotten super excited, so I haven't done it yet. But let me know if you want to see a bunch of other games, more modern games. Eager has all the Zukor games, of course, work with Eager, but Eager also has a company called Ardea Games that they are the owner of, essentially. And Ardea makes somewhat interesting 3D Unity-style games for Eager now. El Chad likes, yeah, there's the stuff. You want some Island? Okay. All right, so let me get my wires on here. So this is FZ and PZ. And how forward am I? That's about right. Okay. And this is not the right way to put wires on when you are bald. You should really like prep the skin and put a dab of paste on the skin first. That will mean that the wire sticks a lot better. And chances are about even that I'm going to have some signal quality issues now when I try to start, but we'll see. El Chad saying, oh, inner tube or dual drive would be cool. Yeah, I can demo those, sure. I love those games. We don't provide those by default to our clients, but we do have the add-on option of both inner tube and dual drive. And in our offices, people love dual drive. Kids love dual drive especially. The favorite level is the zombie apocalypse level, where you can race whatever car you want and hit zombies. And if you hit them really well, they explode into groceries like a ham hock and a chicken leg and things before you go by. So yeah, people love dual drive, and Zucor's Air is pretty good too. Inner Tube is not an eager game, El Chad. Inner Tube is a B-medic game. So while I can show it to you in my BioExplorer setup, it's one of those games that you really need Signet these days to run, or their other software. It's kind of hard to get the new Inner Tube working with BioExplorer. I've actually purchased it and been not able to get it working in the past with BioExplorer. So Inner Tube's a cool game. It's old school, but I would encourage folks that are still using things like BioExplorer to potentially find a better reward environment or build one. Ancient Realms on Inner Tube has the best soundtrack. Yeah, the problem is that you can't necessarily use that these days anymore unless you find an old version. You know, the old demo with 19 launches is still out there, and people can find that and run them, but it's a little flaky and a bit buggy, even in that version. So, you know, I'm not a huge fan of Inner Tube, only because I like software that mostly works. And I like people to be able to like just do the training and have the game get out of the way. And Inner Tube would tend to crash when we used it a lot on various systems. So Eager doesn't crash that often. All right, so let me start the software. Let me run my session. I think you said you wanted Island, right? Okay. Let's go for Island. Very old school, very basic. So the blue bar there at the bottom is it's usually my inhibit brainwaves. It's initializing. Let it wake up here for a second. Initializing. There we go. Those are brainwaves. What's our quality looking like? It's a little noisy. Let me push on my wires here. Yeah, the wire's not seated very well. You can see just holding it in, I got a thinner trace. That means the 60 hertz noise is going away. It's still pretty noisy though. Maybe it's the position of the amp. Move the amp. Let's see. Yeah, it's super noisy. Let me do some scaling. The scale's only 20. Is it plugged in properly? Always good to check. It seems to be. Make sure the wires are snug in their sockets. Make sure my ear clip, which is the ground, is on snugly. And there it goes. See, I didn't make any changes. You can see that my signal trace there changed right as it went off the screen. As it comes out behind my head now, you can tell that the raw quality is much, much better. And that was me squeezing my ear clip. So what was happening was the ground wasn't sufficiently tight, and the amplifier was trying to bridge past a weak ground, and it was getting 60 hertz noise and a lot of muscle tension. Now you're seeing pops in the signal, which is mostly me moving and things like that. So you can see below me on the screen, there's those little purple, green, and yellow boxes. Below me, 4 to 7 is Theta. The average in the far right there is 19 microvolts. Or 20 microvolts, and I'm making that amount, and I want to make less, so I put the threshold at 30 microvolts, THR. And then I have 12 to 20 microvolts, also down training. So you can see my average is 11, and I set my threshold at 12, and then we have a 20 to 32, which is a little bit hidden there. So let me kick this off, and when all three brain waves are in the right range, that's going to allow the, let me see, F5, there we go. And that's F11. So in terms of auto thresholding, if you look at the inhibit percentage there on the right, where it says inhib 29, inhib 28, and then below reward 60. The RWRD reward is a bit misleading here because we're in down training mode. So if you see next to my 12 to 20 band, under it says AMPL in yellow and then INHB. That's a sign you're in down training mode. It's inhibiting that reward band. So you can reverse the percentage. So right now the 65% is really 35%, for instance. And what I've done is set this up so that every 30 seconds, it's going to reset the percentages back to 25, 65, 15, basically. Or in this case, 25, 35, 15, all inhibited. So that's what I meant by auto thresholding. El Chatarino saying, "Oh yeah, some island. It has the volcano that was hot stuff back when it came out." Yeah, this is actually not even the first version of Island. This is the more like modern version. The old version didn't have shading. It wasn't quite as photorealistic, believe it or not. Very similar metaphor, and most of the graphics were the same, but it actually wasn't quite this good. What's happening is whenever my brain spends 1/2 of a second with the brainwaves trending in the right direction or staying in the right direction relative to the threshold bars, then it's allowing the game to run. And when this game runs, we get a beep happening, which is also showing a seagull on the screen and a bit of white stripes. The metaphor here is you're in a boat leaving an island, and this is your wake coming out behind you. There's a game in Eager as another built-in game like this one called called Highway, which is just about the same. And Island and Highway have slightly different things. Mostly what's different is what shows up in the sky. I think on Highway, it's stars in the sky instead of seagulls. And at 500 points, something happens, and it's a different thing in both Island and Highway. El Chatarino's asking, does the sky get clearer? It does not. Every 3 minutes, it'll reset and then start over the blank sky. But every 500 points, something else will happen. So we're now at 194 points. So those points are essentially me spending 1/2 of a second with all the brain waves trending or staying in the right direction. And you may be wondering how I'm doing it. It's not voluntary. The software has adjusted itself right next to where I am. And then it's waiting for my brain to either stay or to trend briefly across those threshold lines. And it's reacting to that. So most neurofeedback is an involuntary conditioning process, operant conditioning or instrumental conditioning. And you're sitting here watching, chilling out. And generally you can start to feel things creep in if you're sensitive to training and you've done it a bunch right about now, which is what's happening. So a little bit of like energy is creeping in as my first subjective experience. Feels like I had a little bit of coffee a couple of hours ago, and it's just now starting to kick in. So yeah, in the alpha landscape, when we're talking again about glutamatergic stuff, normally we would be talking about people that are abusing alpha promoting substances like alcohol, like GHB, like there's a few other substances that are GABAergic, and those are really slippery slope substances. The brain does not do real well with chronic exposure to high levels of GABA. So, and I say high levels, like your GABA supplement's not causing trouble, but moderate drinking every single day is. In some ways for the brain, it's better to occasionally have more alcohol than it is to than it is to chronically drink. Having 2 drinks every single night requires your body to adjust to that with a higher chronic level of glutamate. And the brain will adapt to that after several months, and it will have a really hard time readapting to that. And you'll see a decade after somebody quits drinking, the brain is still in this like hypercoherent, high beta state, and the person's a bit shaky, and it's hard to relax, and it's hard to fall asleep and stay asleep. And that's one of the reasons people relapse into drinking, is they're shaky and nervous and have sleep trouble. And a lot of the reasons we turn to GABAergic substances like alcohol is because it is a depressant. It soothes that internal environment. It also helps with sleep. So if you have someone who's withdrawing from alcohol and their GABAergic or alpha tones getting worse, it sort of puts them in this really rough place of having to muscle through without the support of the previous substance. And the brain doesn't really easily reset those systems, but neurofeedback does. So in 5 or 6 weeks of working on the alpha, using usually alpha theta training, you can re-educate the brain's ability to make that alpha pretty reliably to the point where people can fall asleep at will when they haven't been able to sleep in decades sometimes easily. And it's a pretty reliable effect. There's some early work with the early work on alpha theta. There's really two main people working on it. One was Doug Quirk, and one was Eugene Peniston Kowalski. And Doug Quirk was working with violent offenders, and Peniston was working with alcohol. And they both found a reversal of the 1 year recidivism or relapse rates. So in the violent offenders who were incarcerated, the relapse rate dropped from 75% to 25%. And in the population of alcoholics they worked with, the 1 year relapse rate to alcohol was right around the same thing. And that was the opposite of what it had been without those interventions in those populations before. I think these studies were both done in Canada. Doug Quirk's was. It was very, very early in the literature as well. Oh, here we go. 465 points. Let's see what happens at 500. So I've had great success working in alcohol environments, alcohol recovery environments with alpha theta neurofeedback and SMR, helping people really recover powerfully with a lot of control over their sleep, their anxiety, their attention, and their cravings using alpha theta and alpha training. Now, you can also use alpha for the immune system. Dr. Gary Schumer. Oh, here's my 500 points. Get a little confetti explosion of the volcano. Gary Schumer did a study showing that alpha training at PZ brings up T cells, CD4 plus cells in an immunocompromised population. Pretty robust study. And Sieber and Fisher uses alpha theta, as do myself and a lot of other providers in the field. We use alpha rebound phenomena in the back of the brain to break up anxiety for people. Also, the singulates, the big default mode networks, the front midline, again, doesn't make a lot of alpha if we're obsessive, and the back midline doesn't make a lot of alpha if we're fearful and stuck in an evaluation mode, rumination mode. And so you can reward alpha on those tissues. The FC minus PZ I'm doing right now does tolerate alpha rewards if you need them, if they're good for your brain. And so I just know that myself, I would not respond well to rewarding 6.5 or 7 to 10 or something. So I'm doing this version of an alpha protocol that's not really an alpha protocol. But you can use these protocols to break up perseverative stuff or ruminative stuff, i.e. OCD or PTSD type phenomena, pretty reliably. And the other thing I'll say about alpha in terms of spot training or regional training is you can do some work in a developmentally atypical population, especially ASD and other developmental things that are similar, that have a social and a sensory component. You'll find a lot of back right tempo parietal junction alpha issues. And you'll find in this case, this is one of the very rare cases where training up the faster alpha can make a big difference. And training 10 to 13 or 11 to 14 can actually be the appropriate thing to do depending on the individual. So there is something there with regards to alpha in terms of spot training. But again, if beta is super high or theta is super high, inhibiting those become perhaps more important than boosting the alpha in a linear way. All right, so I'm at the midpoint here, done 9 minutes. Let me switch over to a C4. So I'll take my forehead wire and put the paste on C4, which is, let me actually do some measuring. So there's my vertex, there's CZ, there's my T4, and halfway between is about there. And then put that on. Let's see if the signal recovers. Somewhat. Let me push down on the wire. Let's see. It's kind of messy. Oh, well, let me switch the ground and the reference. So which wire is it? It's yellow wire. So we'll do yellow wire minus my right ear. And then the ground. How's that look? Hey, look at that. I must be a neuroscientist. I can get signals off my head. So there's my different EEG. Now it's coming off the right side, C4 minus A2. Joe Barr is asking, does the order of these protocols matter? Very sophisticated question, Joe. The short answer is yes. The long answer is it's really complicated and why. Instead of telling you why, or why I think, or how I come about building sets, let me just sort of say that you should think both about how you want to be left. The last protocol will often linger subjectively. And will a later protocol interact with an earlier protocol? And if it will, then how? Then, what is your goal for the first half? And is the second half going to build on that goal? That often you'll have some sense. In this case, I'm bringing up my beta, my 11.5 hertz beta, once I change the protocol, because I'm bringing down my 12 hertz beta before that. And so that's why I did it. And I wanted to be left with some of the SMR beta going into the evening. And I didn't want to be left with more of the theta inhibition and the beta inhibition. So let me actually change the segment here, function F5, and then F5 once more to begin. Oh, I got to hit F11 to scale. It's not scaled currently. Okay, there we go. So, same game, but I'm doing a different protocol. Now it's C4 minus A2. And now I'm training 4 to 7, still inhibiting theta, but I'm rewarding 11.5. So you can see that now it says RWRD below the band. And you can see that my average 11.5 hertz beta is about 9 microvolts. I want to make more. And so I've set my threshold. Right now it's at 5.38. That's 67% of the reward, basically. And I think I skipped this, but on this game, the island game, the purple box is the size of the theta, the amplitude of the theta. So you get a visual cue on the screen if your theta climbs, like right now. It can catch your attention and draw your attention to it, which will help you actually have smaller theta. And then the yellow band is muscle tension or physical tension. Now, whenever you're inhibiting fast beta, you're going to catch both bursts of beta and bursts of high frequency, brain waves, but also muscle tension and movement, which often occurs first in the high frequency range as the muscles start to fire. So we often inhibit beta always, in most protocols to catch any overactivation. In fact, there's one paper, it's kind of a fear-mongering paper, but it talks about the risk of getting unintentional beta recruitment by doing neurofeedback. And it's clearly somebody who doesn't do and really doesn't have any experience with clinical neurofeedback, because we always inhibit fast beta, because otherwise people would learn to tense up and drive up the entire signal and walk out of the office tense. So this is another reason we inhibit the beta, not just because of the beta, but it's to sort of act as a natural check on the body tension creeping in, basically. Radar is asking, can neurofeedback reduce the length of post-acute withdrawal syndrome? Absolutely, dramatically, and probably recover sparkle and joy and emotional control and sleep onset ability and dreaming and motivation. Absolutely. Yeah, everyone who's withdrawing from cannabis should probably do neurofeedback. Or even if you're not withdrawing from cannabis, do neurofeedback. Neurofeedback will potentiate the brain's plasticity so strongly that even if you keep using cannabis through it, you'll find that you're reducing your level of use because you're so sensitive to it. And if you have withdrawn and you're in this sort of like potentiated misery, then doing neurofeedback should kick you out of that pretty quickly. But yeah, I would say that it should be a huge impact for many people who are in that pause kind of place. That's a very miserable place to be in. So definitely get some neurofeedback or something else if you're in that state. So I'm already, just over 3 minutes in, and I'm already feeling the shift. I went from having kind of a smooth, almost like light kind of focus where my mood was lifting and my energy was coming up and I was speaking faster. And now that I'm doing SMR training, I'm feeling a little bit more weighted and calmer and a tiny bit of tiredness creeping in. I set this up for 12 minutes, but I might only do 9 just to avoid training too heavily before the evening. So guys, let me know other questions you have. We usually do about an hour's worth of live stream, and it's coming up on 50 minutes already, 50. So happy to answer more questions. I was going to do a few things over the next few weeks, including maybe Have some short videos that are not live streams to share that I keep working on that I'll get out the door sooner or later. Have a couple pieces of software I'm finishing up over the summer that I'll share with you guys who are doing neurofeedback. You can use as dashboards to sort of manage your own neurofeedback. Peak Brain, which is my neurofeedback company, would be happy to offer anyone who's watching this video a discount brain mapping. So if you need brain mapping, come to our offices in London or Stockholm or New York City, St. Louis, Los Angeles, Orange County, California. We're also now in Southern Florida. We have a pop-up in the West Palm Beach area, and we're in Nova Scotia, and we will soon be in Portugal. So if you want to come to a Peak Brain and get your brain mapped and go over data with me, come to one of our offices. You can have a nice discount. And otherwise, you can get raw data and send it off, and I'll still charge you the same discount, but do some consulting if you want. So Joe Barrow's got a question. I read an anecdote somewhere where someone did neurofeedback, and it seemed to reduce the chance of hangover. Is that a thing? Yes, but you're going to see that it's a different sort of thing across people. Some people do neurofeedback and have a drink and go, whoa, I'm not as altered by alcohol. And other people have a drink and they're like, oh my God, I'm completely wrecked by having one drink after doing some neurofeedback. So I find that doing neurofeedback will make the brain both more sensitive to adulterants, but also able to handle them without getting knocked over as reliably. So, you get more drunk, but you're less intoxicated in some ways. I think that probably if it improves hangover, it's likely doing it by helping to buffer the sleep issue that's created by the acetaldehydes and things. It's my guess. I don't know if it's an actual thing though, Radar, or Joe Bar, but people do have different experiences with alcohol once they start doing neurofeedback. And I have heard things like that before. Yeah. Not sure why. Radar saying, create an office in Northern California, Doc. We totally could. If someone wants to open up a Peak Brain, we're opening up partner offices now. We have a partnership deal available where we help you hang a shingle and do a lot of back-end office supervision and mentoring and teach you to become a Peak Brain person. I think I might move out of Southern California myself and move up to either Northern California or to Oregon at some point. I grew up in New England and I kind of miss having seasons and the occasional, rainy month. So I might move up myself out of Southern California. Maybe I'll put an office someplace that I move, but I'm not super attached to any areas. So we'll see. But let me know where you want to see a Peak Brain. If you're not near a Peak Brain, remember that we work 100% virtual. So if you want to do a neurofeedback program with us, we can send you equipment, do remote brain mapping, guide you through setups, teach you to do neurofeedback. And we have like 80% of our client base runs that way and never sees a Peak Brain office. And then, in Europe and the UK, people come to our offices, get brain maps and leave with remote equipment. And they work with our global team. We have clients in India. We have clients in Australia. We have clients in Hong Kong. We have clients in so many countries. So it's easier a little bit if you're in one of the countries where we have an office. But if you're not and you're struggling, let us know. We can probably find a way to work with you. But yeah, Radar, Northern California is a lot closer. I really should have a presence there. I'll say though, I have a lot of clients in Northern California and most of them just pop down to Southern California for a brain map or we send off the brain mapping equipment. So, I probably have as many clients in Northern California as I do in Southern California right now. A good 10 or 15 easily in each region. And I don't think I need an office up there right now. It would really take somebody who is going to be the anchor person to partner and to kind of run a client base up there and to have maybe, the need or the interest in doing that. That would get us up there. I'm also really focused on developing software to make it easier to do neurofeedback, the sort of management side of it. So as I develop that, it'll let me share this stuff we do more broadly. It'll let us drive costs down, make it more reliable, make the decision-making and management around it a lot better. And that really is still a point of pain, not quite failure, but a point of pain in the management of neurofeedback is knowing how somebody reacts and then what you should do to adjust after that. And releasing some dashboard software, sort of fitness tracker for the brain kind of software later this year, will let me be able to handle lots of groups of people without it just becoming, the Dr. Andrew Hill show. Because Peak Brain was never meant to just be my practice. It was meant to be an organization that teaches people to take control of their own brain health and do their own biohacking. And we do that really, really well with a lot of our clients. But I want to make it more accessible. And I get asked every week, usually at least once by Monday, if I will open up a new office someplace or will supervise somebody doing this someplace. And this is our answer to that, is to release some software that will help us manage groups of people really easily, and then train and mentor individuals in this space and let them extend our brand. So if you're interested in that, come find me and ask questions, and we potentially could support you having a peak brain too. Jayhan's asking updates on the PIR HEG software. No real updates right now, Jayhan. I'm sorry. I sort of have other projects ahead of me. This is the one drawback probably of being a small company trying to take over the world, is I have to get my dashboard software out first, and then I have to refocus on the HEG software after that. But I will do that at this point. Those are my priorities. So I have a directory coming out shortly, probably this week or next week. I'll have a new provider directory for the field. And then a month or two after that, the dashboard software that lets you run a practice. And maybe a month or two after that, the HEG software. It's probably a reasonable time frame. So it might be end of the year for the HEG platform at this stage, Jayhan. But I'll keep it really accessible. One of the things I like about HEG is it's easy to use and it's fairly simple. And so you can use it with, screaming kids or, elders that are, frustrated with you sticking wires to their heads. And it works for a lot of things that classic neurofeedback doesn't work quite as well for, like migraines or social function or brain fog. So I will release this software relatively cheaply. It'll probably be like some, few tens of dollars a month kind of thing as a platform. And then I'll start iterating on it and adding probably EEG features to it as well. But I'm not 100% sure on that neurofeedback training platform. That's a much more ambitious software development project. So I think that I'll be able to add more value to people in the sort of visualization of their training sessions and their impacts with the dashboard software before I'm able to turn towards the HEG software. Ooh, so I am getting a little tired. I'm also finished my session here. But I can feel that I trained. A little tiny bit of fatigue creeping in from the neurofeedback. So let me guys know what kind of topics you want me to hit up on these live streams. I've thought about several that I might do, although I'm always happy to shift to things you guys want. In fact, tonight was mostly because on the Discord, where there's a pretty active group of biohackers, people were asking a lot of questions about alpha. And I don't think I answered all the questions, but I answered a lot of them tonight. So if you have more questions about neurofeedback or biohacking in general, aging, ADHD, alcohol, all kinds of things, let me know. I'm always happy to chat. You can book a free call with me. I do free consults, so discovery calls. So if you want to discover a few things about neurofeedback and biohacking, you're welcome to book a half an hour of my time. And until I blow up and become too stupidly famous, I will make those free for now, while I have time. So, grab some time in my calendar if you want and ask questions. I won't give you the hard sell on neurofeedback, I promise. But I am interested in giving everyone the tools to take control of their brain health and their performance, which is what this live stream is for. So please do me a favor, try to get the word out. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, give it a subscribe. Maybe find another video and leave a comment or a like. Try to add some engagement. Signal to the YouTube gods that my content is something you're watching and interacting with, and maybe they'll share it out more. Otherwise, guys, I'll see you next week. Take good care of those brains. And until I talk to you again, I hope you're having a great experience